Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem, and happy holidays. Closing down on Feliz Navidad here, and hope you're all having a good one. I've got a great and very different show for you today with a guest whose resume is just unbelievable and not a paraglider. So very different. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Stay tuned for that. I got a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get to it. The first is insurance. I understand a lot of people utilize my article on insurance that I try to keep really up to date on the website. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com and just put the search term in insurance, the article is called Unscrambling Insurance, and I've just recently updated that again, as GEOS is not going to offer most of their policies in terms of getting you home if you have an accident or repatriation and a lot of other things. They're only going to still provide the high risk benefit in case you hit your SOS on your spot or your inReach, and they were kind of a one-stop shop there. So now you really have to go back to you need kind of three different things. You need the insurance in case you hit your SOS, which you can still get through GEOS, and then you need repatriation insurance. What I suggest is through Global Rescue. There are a couple others like MedJet. And then you need a really good travel insurance that covers medical in country in case you get hurt and you got to have surgery or something before you get home. So three different things. There are others out there that are not in the article, but these are the ones I really know of, and I've done a lot of study on them, and I know they work, and I've had many friends that have had to utilize them, unfortunately, and nobody's had any trouble. So check that out if you're traveling. I know a lot of people are getting ready to travel this winter for various flying escapades, and don't go uncovered. Don't think it's not going to happen to you. It can put your family or your friends or our community in big bind if you have an accident and you're not covered properly. So check that out. Second thing is I usually have this at the end of every show, just about contributing, but we've been putting out a lot of bonus content lately, and that's for subscribers, but we don't put anything ever behind a paywall. I kind of figure that everything we're doing here is a public service announcement, and we're just trying to help our community and help everybody get better and fly more safely. So that's the purpose, and so that's why I don't have anything behind a paywall. But for those of you who do support the show, obviously we really appreciate it. There are a ton of costs here and a lot of time and editing and doing the interviews and all that. So if you can, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. We really appreciate it, and there are various ways to do so. They're all spelled out on the website, cloudbasedmayhem.com. And I know I've sent you back and forth on this a few times, but for those of you who especially contribute just, $1 a show, which is great, that if you do it through the website or through PayPal, that kind of thing, they take a lot of fees there, and it's better, I've learned now, through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem, and you can find that link on the website. They're the best in terms of fees, and they can also set it up so you can just calculate it out for the number of shows per year and pay it in one go, and then the fees are a fraction of what they are if you just do it $1, $1. So all that's on the website. Again, we really appreciate it. If you can't afford to support the show, send me an email. I'll get you all set up with a lifetime account. You can always access all the content we put out whenever you want. So thank you. All right, my guest today, Peter Zaccagnino. He is, when I Googled him, initially it came up as actor, but he is everything. He's a philanthropist. He's basically a modern day Chuck Yeager. He's flown over 23,000 hours in more than 270 aircrafts. He's flight tested over 685. He's built his own airplanes. He's been around the world a bunch of times on private airplanes, and he's a 4 times air racing gold champion. He's in the Aviation Hall of Fame. This guy has done it all. He's been at gunpoint in Pakistan. He's been to every country but one, and I think you'll be surprised on the one that he hasn't been to. Anyway, had a blast with this. Really fun. Oh, and he's also an author. He's doing a whole series of books. His first 2 are out. The first one is Relevant, and the second one is The New Cold War. And these are kind of military fiction spy novels that are doing really well and people love them and super exciting stuff. So we talk about his documentary filmmaking and bush planes up in Alaska, and he was part of a big discovery series called The Most Dangerous, I don't have that in front of me, but the Most Dangerous Flight series. So yeah, incredibly productive person and has had a very, very interesting life, and he's not slowing down. So we had a blast with this. It was super fun. I think you're going to enjoy it as well. A lot of great takeaways. Happy holidays, everybody, and enjoy this talk with Peter Zaccagnino. Peter, this is very cool, man. We didn't meet in a traditional way, but welcome to the Mayhem. And I'm really excited to talk to somebody who's had a very different resume and life than I typically talk to. I talk to a lot of people that take a lot of risk in free flight, but it sounds like you've taken some pretty big moves in jet airplanes and the powered side of things, and you've got some fantastic stories that I can't wait to get in. But where I thought we'd start is close your eyes for a second and imagine you're at a party where surprisingly, no one knows you. And they say, "Hey, Pete, I'm so-and-so. What do you do?" How do you answer that question? Because, when I Googled you, it came up that you're an actor, but
I've done a little Discovery Channel work too. Yeah. And it's funny. I guess Google has algorithms because a big compliment I got a few years ago was someone I was working with said, "I Googled you. It was really fun to Google you." And I was like, wow, that's a heck of a nice thing to say, I guess.
That's a good compliment. Yeah, totally.
I dug it. It was cool.
But how do you answer that question? I mean, my gosh, your resume is impressive.
Yeah, I definitely pursue the adventure. When I'm given a talk somewhere and they're like, okay, my concern always is, well, adventure means you got to do something that's scary, right? And I'm like, no. An adventure could be just you've never played chess before and you're going to chess camp for a month, because that's an adventure, right?
Sure.
You're challenging your brain. You're doing something you haven't done. You're getting uncomfortable. You're going to look bad in front of people and all those risks. But yeah, I really just pursued the adventure. It's, I want to get out and see the world. That was a motivator. I love to learn. I love to teach. I'm always teaching at some capacity. I never get away from teaching, whether it was at a college I taught at or, teaching some flying aspect or whatever. And you kind of put that all together into this Venn diagram where you have all this overlap. And I look at that overlap, and that overlap is me. It's the adventure. It's all things flying. I'd like to try some of your flying that I haven't done. I've done some other free flying, but it's just adds into the adventure and the challenge. And I'm a big believer. Anything you learn helps everything. I mean, it just helps everything. Whatever you're learning, it's going to help some capacity, right? And so that's kind of the short answer.
But, so if somebody came up, you would say, "Yeah, I'm an adventurer." That's the number one thing, or would it be, are you a racer? Are you a test pilot? Could you give me a single one answer?
Renaissance.
Renaissance.
That's probably the best single word answer. I mean, it's definitely all things aviation, right?
Sure.
Test flying, the racing, traveling the world, taking customers around the world and really lighten up their daily grind a little bit. It's definitely all things aviation, but the whole Renaissance concept to me philosophically aligns with my ideals, and I'm a pretty ideological person, probably to a fault actually. But and that's why I got into the writing. It's really hard for me because I'm an engineer by study and by practice that parlayed into my test flying as an aeronautical engineer. And so I write like an engineer. The door's open, go through the door. What's so hard about that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it was really hard to write for me, but I really enjoyed the process. And all things flying for sure. Taking some personal risks, yeah.
So author, pilot, and you're kind of aviation expert. I mean, you've flown over 23 in your bio. You probably got more hours now, but you've flown over 23,000 hours and more than 270 aircraft. flight tested over. I mean, you're Chuck Yeager, man.
I used to harass Chuck Yeager actually, but yeah, I fly all things as I can get my hands on. If you let me fly a paraglider, I'll be there.
Nice. We can arrange that.
All right, I'll take you up on that. I really will too.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you're in a good part of the world for it. Living in the Wasatch there, just on the other side is one of the greatest places to learn in the country. And then, you can get up in the big mountains right after that. So yeah, for sure. We'll do it.
Cool.
Your new book just came out. I wanted to start off talking with your first one. You and I both published our first book in 2020. Mine was all about paragliding, and yours was fictional military. And hats off. Is this fiction? I think is much harder to write than nonfiction. Is it typical fiction in that this really was much of it is based on your own life and experience, and you just got a little whimsical, or how did it work writing it?
Yeah. The first book, Relevant, has a lot of factual stories in it.
Okay.
But I put it into a narrative so that it was as readable as my skill levels allowed, basically, and made it into a story that would allow me to continue the story into book 2, book 3. And I've outlined 5 books for the series.
Wow.
And, long as people buy them, I'll keep writing them. And so, yeah, there's a lot of real life story based stuff in Relevant. Less, probably about 50% of the second book. About half of it is real stories. And like in the first book, everybody thought I was picking on my brother, and he's not my brother. I mean, there was no representation of him being my brother, but everybody's like, well, Pete was raised by a single mom and has one brother, and I use that context, and they're like, God, you were mean to your brother in the book. I was like, that's not my brother. It's just backstory,
Right.
But so yeah, and I've lived around the world in a lot of different places, so I drew in a lot of those experiences and some close calls and being detained in Nigeria and roadblocks in Pakistan, stuff like that. It helped.
Was that all military?
No, just boy. How do you answer that? No, not military. I'm not prior military. Just to be setting the record straight and clear. I just did a lot of different jobs and flight test and some other types of work, and it had me in a lot of strange places, over the years, and got to see some, how we politely describe it, unique things. Yeah, unique things. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, I spent a bunch of time sailing around the world, did 2 circumnavigations. There were a few times we went into places that I would describe for sure as unique.
Yeah, it's nothing like you see on the major news outlets, is it?
No,
No.
definitely.
Yeah.
Let's rewind way back. Tell me about your family a little bit. How did you become an adventurer? Where did that spark? Where did it hit?
I give a lot of credit to my mom. I was raised by a single mom, raising 2 obnoxious kids in New Jersey. And she really instilled a sense of confidence and a just go get after it, whatever that is. Again, it doesn't have to be scary stuff. It can be whatever. Just get after it. And my mom was awesome in that spirit, I think is the best way. And definitely out of the box, not doing things that are kind of the standard, and nothing wrong with that. Hey, I could have been on a standard career path and that would have been great. But she definitely said, whatever you're doing is going to be great as long as you're enjoying it. And it's helps other people. It's good for other people. It motivates other people, just be that person. And, we all stumble and fall, but get up, fix it, own it, be accountable, and keep going after it. And I got a lot of that from my mom. And, it was just growing up. It was my mom, my brother, and I. I'm the youngest, and my brother was always pounding on me until I got old enough I could pound back, and that was a big part of it. And he's a great supporter as well. My brother's awesome.
Is he also a pilot?
No, I'm the only pilot, engineer, crazy guy in the family. No one else, has any flying in my family.
And how did the aviation? Was it engineering and then aviation, or aviation and then engineering?
No, I mean, a lot of my life was in parallel is the best way to describe it. If I did it in series, I'd be, 120. And and I can get away without a lot of sleep usually. Not always, but usually. And
Hmm.
so I did my undergrad in aeronautical engineering. And to come back to your primary question, though, I don't really have a good answer. I just
Hmm.
wanted to design, build, and fly airplanes since I can remember. And I had an older brother, Mike, who passed away when I was pretty young. But we would go do the classic, 3-year-old thing where I'd run around the house with a toy airplane, making it fly, right? And he was pretty awesome about that. But it's really the only thing I can point to in my aviation drive. And but again, since I was walking, it was design, build, and fly airplanes. I'm like, so I think I have to become an engineer. I think I have to become a pilot, and I think I have to become, a repairman for aircraft. So I did my engineering degree in Florida, great school, really happy with that. While I was doing that, as the poor kid from Jersey, I was getting flight lessons. I had some grants and, stealing money, borrowing this, that, whatever it took. And then that was a joke, by the way. But anyway, um,
Yeah, what are you, a bank robber too?
yeah,
It doesn't
right.
doesn't say
Yeah.
that on the bio.
I cannot confirm or deny. No, but what flying during my engineering program did for me was I got enough of the pilot licenses very quickly so that I could start making money doing it.
Okay.
And my first thing I did while I was at my late in my freshman year, I started flying skydivers. And so I went down to this place. The owner was this classic grumpy guy and piece of garbage airplane, and I didn't know any better. I was like, "Oh, this plane's awesome! I get to fly it. He's paying me $3.10, But the whole deal was every time I took a load of skydivers up in this little plane, I got paid per load. So I was pretty motivated to get people into the airplanes, and the owner loved it because I would go around and be like, "Hey, aren't you ready to jump? Let's go!" Because I wanted the flight time and the money. And so I would pile them in the plane and do as many loads as I could in the time I had between school and college and everything. And it was awesome. So I was making way more than flipping burgers. Plus, I was
Hmm.
getting flight time, which is everything for pilots. You need to have valuable flight time to advance your career. And it kind of worked, and it rolled into becoming an instructor. And it was basically I became an instructor when I had enough money to do that and find planes and people to teach, and got me into aerobatics. And I knew I wanted to be a test pilot. I was like, well, I better go, chasing after people to fly goofy airplanes. It's kind of my little phrase, the goofy airplanes. And
Why did you know you wanted to be a test pilot?
because I really like what it embodies. It embodies the technical academic engineering part.
Hmm.
High level of accountability. You're responsible for a prototype that a company is banking a ton of money on. And of course, advanced piloting skills. You can't suck. You've
Hmm.
got to deliver. And when emergencies happen, kind of zen like is how I describe it. It's not a adrenaline thing for me at all. It's very zen like, and you got to adapt to the emergency, make it work. Survival's first, safety second, aircraft safety third, and and then you get to fly really high tech planes and work with super smart people, and it just was very appealing to me. And
Hmm.
so I chased after it, and when I was told no, I asked why, and I learned that skill of asking why early on, and I just kept chasing it until it kind of worked out, and
Wow.
so here I am.
And you've done all the hours. I mean, typically, and I don't know anything about powered aviation, so correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
typically someone who's gone down you don't have a path. It sounds it's very adventurous, but so for somebody that goes into test flying and that kind of hours is usually done with military. And so you've been
Yeah.
able to do all this kind of on your own gumption, sounds
Yeah.
like.
The military, when I've flown with military contracts and jobs, most people thought I was a military pilot. So your
Okay.
assessment is absolutely correct. I was the abnormal one. And, we're in flight suits and survival gear and all that stuff. And so it looks very military and for
Okay.
good reasons. I mean, they have great gear. That's just the truth. It's very safe,
Sure.
very good quality. And I was flying some military aircraft. So absolutely, that was a likely avenue. But what I did, there was a couple things that happened. Being an aeronautical engineer, I don't think I could have pursued my flight test route early on without being an aeronautical engineer. I think that was one of those bridging things
Hmm.
um, compared to my peers that were military and went to test pilot school and things like that. That was definitely a big one. The other one, I had a really big break. I had a customer that's a large aircraft manufacturer, starts with a B, based in the Northwest. You know, and they put their trust in me on a pretty cool project, and it went really well. And when the Air Force got involved, I had to go and get prerequisite Air Force training. And they were like apologizing to me because we paused the program. We're in the middle of an SRB, a safety review board. They're like, he can't fly until he has the prerequisites. And the guy in charge was like, he's the only guy who's flown until now. You know, what do you mean he can't fly it? So it was just politics. And
Wow.
yeah, it was awesome because they went and sent me off to various prerequisite training after the fact, and it just added to the resume, you know, especially early on. And now my dossier was getting fatter and thicker, and they kept apologizing. Oh, now you got to do this. Now you got to go to McCord Air Force Base, and et cetera. And that was one of those breaks or building moments. And then I started testing some small planes. That was another kind of turn in the path, and that opened up into the air racing. I started working for this company. Again, it's all on contract, so we come and go all the time. But the small company was making these really fast airplanes, and a lot of people were racing them. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. What could go wrong?
Yeah, sure. So that's how you got into racing, was testing these planes for the company that makes them.
Yeah, and it's just a enthusiast airplane that goes really fast, made of carbon fiber, and well, in some cases fiberglass too. But
is this the Red Bull Air Race type plane?
No, this is the pylon racing that is really high speed. So we're all about speed. And our track, just to keep the story from getting too long, is about an 8-mile circumference. It's not a circle, but it's also not an oval. It's kind of a blob, a roundish blob shape. And what the pylons look like, they're not, but they look like a telephone pole sticking in the desert with a can on top. And then they're painted, and they mark the courses that we're on, and off you go. And so I because I was flying that type of plane called a Lance Air, I got a call from this guy Rick, who's now one of my best friends. I don't know, this is like 18 years ago, I think, something like that. And he's like, hey, you know how to fly a 4P? I'm like, sure. And he's like, can you be our pace pilot? I was like, when? September. I'm like, can you come to the championship air races? I'm like, great, let's go.
Right.
So I flew that plane as pace, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll be here next year racing. There is no questions about it. And that's how it got started.
And you had quite a bit of success there.
Yeah.
You couple, it was a goal. I don't know how this works. Is this a circuit that's all over the world? Do you do a lot of traveling for it? Do you ship in airplanes, or is it mostly in the States? Or
well, it is. It's such a tough sport because it's gone all over the place. We've had races in foreign countries. We've raced in Portugal. We've had races in China. It used to be a circuit, and for whatever reason, when there's an aviation fatality, it has such a different perspective on it than if car racing has a fatality. I don't know why. It's just, it is what it is. But and there was a fatality a long time ago, and it really changed races. And then we had another one in 2011 that almost ended racing. So I'm giving you a longer answer, but the championships have always been at Reno in September. There's been other races. Depends on the year. Depends when you ask. It's been unfortunately inconsistent. It used to be very consistent, and but it's hard. I mean, it's the fastest sport in the world, right? By far. I mean, my fastest lap was 560 in 2019. 560 miles an hour. There's no sport that touches us in speed, but it doesn't get the exposure you would think it would get, right? And I mean, look at someone flying a paraglider around the world. It doesn't get the exposure it should get.
Well, geez, not even close when it comes to that. But is that
Yeah, I mean, it's cool stuff, but I don't know why it currently is a little bit on the downside, I guess is the best way to put it.
Is that how you got into the Aviation Hall of Fame? Or is that just
Um,
everything? Is that it
yeah,
all coupled together?
but I didn't even know I was nominated. They told me I was nominated one year and I didn't get in, unbeknownst to me. But the year I got in and they called me up to kind of interview me, I got past that first barrier and they were interviewing me. It was really a lot of things. It was, from the charitable work, the lecturing I do, pro bono, just to try and mentor people. They're looking for rounded aviators, I think. And
Okay.
the racing, winning at the championship and setting records. I've set a bunch of records over the years. I don't even know which ones stand anymore, but that all it all just fed into it. I think is the best way to put it.
What kind of records? Speed records or what?
Yeah, I did a couple, like crossing the Atlantic, set, for
Oh,
example, a speed record. Sometimes I've done some pretty funny city pairs. I say funny because there's these city pair records and they're not that hard to do, but they're funny because you can get this silly plane that is just used for training. And we kind of made a parody of it and a joke about it. And so I did this record in Florida and, it's a city pair record from, St. Pete, Florida to Daytona Beach in this 100-mile-an-hour airplane, and so there was some of that and some course leadership stuff, things like
huh.
that.
Let me ask you what's, I'm sure, a ridiculous question for in the powered world. But again, I don't know anything. I've never flown an airplane. I've been on a lot of airplanes, but you've flown 270. My daughter came home the other day and said, "Dad, can you drive?" She's 4.
Okay.
"Dad, can you drive any car?" And I said, "Yeah, I can drive every car." I was my job was valet parker back in my teens at Caesars. You learn how to drive every. I said, "Yeah, I can drive every." Can you fly any airplane? Can you just get in
Well,
and fly it?
skill wise, I'm comfortable. I could safely get a plane up and down again. But there's legal requirements. So, like, let's say you're an airline pilot, and for the last 10 years, you've been flying the 737, and you get upgraded or side graded or whatever to a 757, and you've never flown it. You would have to go to school for that specific airplane. It's just about that plane.
Right.
And that school is anywhere from, depending on the jet, a month to 3 months. It just depends on
But
the
let's
month.
take away. I get that. I mean, this
Yeah.
you
Okay.
guys have all kinds of regulations, so which is good. But but could you let's just say there are no regulations and every single plane is lined up on the runway. Could you just get in and figure it out?
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable.
Really?
Get in and figure it
Jeez,
out. I
that's
might
pretty
do a little
cool.
reading,
Right.
but yeah, I don't want to take anything away from that requirement of training. But yeah,
Of course.
if some crazy thing was happening and I had to get in and fly a plane and save a baby, I don't know. I would be
Yeah.
happy. I'd be
You
happy
could
to
you
do
could
that.
do it. The principle's the same. It's just different speeds, different
Yeah,
computers, different and everything.
pull
Yeah.
back, the houses get smaller. Push forward, to get bigger. Push the throttle up.
Okay.
um,
If you could step out of your house right now and walk into the plane of your choice, what would it be?
ooh, and I just had to pick one. Didn't have a
Yeah.
choice. Yeah,
Yeah. No, it's just the one that you dream about still at night is sitting right there, right on the runway, ready to roll.
probably an F-20.
Oh, okay.
It never got into production. It's a lot like an F-5 and has a great performance, and it's very intriguing to me. It'll never be in production. I mean, that probably high on my list.
Hmm. What do you love most about aviation?
Ooh, definitely the freedom part. I mean,
Hmm.
it's pretty cool not to be constrained by lines on a road and pavement. And I never tire when I'm flying anything, a slow plane, a jet, 50,000 feet or 500 feet. I never tire of looking down, just watching the world go by. It's not like I'm doing it, nonstop, but I can always look down and just I dig it.
Hmm.
But definitely the freedom is probably the biggest answer. But learning all the different planes is a challenge, and I do enjoy that. I could go to school once a year for a new jet, and I would, or a new airplane for that matter. I would love it. Like there's a plane right now called a Beech 18, and it's not that it wouldn't be that uncommon for me to fly that plane. I just never have. It's just no reason. It's twin engine, radial engine, old school. It's kind of a Harley of the skies from the 50s, and it's a cool airplane. I'm going to be flying it soon, but I still kind of look forward to that challenge of that airplane because I've just never flown it. And yeah, I've flown hundreds of hours and thousands of hours with radial engines, bigger, smaller, blah, 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 tail draggers and all that stuff. But it's different. And that's intriguing to me, to go out and find the challenges, find out what you don't like about that ride and what you do like about it. That's all.
This is something that I haven't seen in anybody's resume. I've been to a lot of countries, I think 105 or something now with all the sailing. You've been to every one but one. So what's the one country you haven't been to, and how did you pull that off? Is that still going today? Are you still just traveling constantly, or tell me about the travel?
Sure. As test flying was, let me give you a little bit bigger answer. When test flying was changing, the market was changing. I have to make a living just like you do and everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I pivoted a little bit into more of the corporate jets. And so I've done some ferry flying where I would take, customer bought a plane. It's in France. I got to go get it, bring it across the Atlantic. And I enjoy that. I love crossing the Atlantic, especially stopping in Iceland. It never gets old. But anyway.
So you have deliveries of aircraft just like you do with sailboats.
Yep. Same thing.
A lot of that
right?
kind of work.
Yep.
Okay. Wow.
Yep. Very similar. So that was a part of it. And that's led to some things. And then I've also been hired to help a new jet company. They made a new airplane. And there was this little jet I got involved with in 2008. And I literally, between the company and some of their customers, took that one little jet to over 90 countries.
Jeez.
And that was, because some of it was, I was helping their sales team. Some of it was deliveries. Some of it was, I got a new customer that had one, and I was his tour guide around the world. I had one customer that, like one year I took him all over Europe, for example. And then one year we did East Africa.
And is this a little tail dragger, or is this a jet?
No, this
is
a jet. But it's a very small jet. It's a
so you can
good
land
airplane.
on shorter runways.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but a really good little jet. I enjoy it. It's called an Eclipse, and it was really fun to fly. And heck, I took him on an around the world trip in that little jet. 700-mile legs at a time or whatever they were, and 7 weeks just surfing around the world with this little jet as our transport.
How do you cross the Pacific when you can only go 700 miles? What are you hitting on the way?
Yeah.
Give me that route. That'd be pretty
Sure.
neat.
I'll bang the route out for you in that little plane. We went from Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Montreal with a fuel stop in between. Montreal, had dinner at one of my favorite restaurants, of course. Got to have the good food. Then we went Montreal to Goose Bay, Canada.
Okay.
Goose Bay to Narsarsuaq, Greenland. Landed in Narsarsuaq, which is another really cool spot. Narsarsuaq to Reykjavik, Iceland. Overnighted there, did some trips and other things I recommended around there, some trekking. And then there to Wick. Wick, I picked up some scotch for them and put that in the back of the plane. It's a scotch you can't get outside of, you can get it outside, but not common. Anyway.
You and I need to become better friends. We have a love of scotch.
No problem. Then we went Wick to Milan, Italy. I want to take his folks to this seafood restaurant there in Milan. That's spectacular. Then we went from Milan to southern Italy. Where did I stop in southern Italy for fuel? Boy, I usually don't forget things like that. Anyway, and then we went to Crete, Heraklion. Heraklion to Cairo. We got a couple days there, hung out with camels and went to the pyramids and all those things. Plus Luxor, flew down to Luxor, and that's a pretty cool place, the Valley of Kings. Then we did, from there, I went to Riyadh. His passenger got yelled at for using the royal bathroom. That was hilarious. And we went from Riyadh, and we went down to Oman, to Muscat. Stayed there for 2 days. We went and sailed in the in the Gulf there. You know,
Mm.
we hung out with the pirates and all the bad guys. It was hilarious.
Yeah, just
And
right there in Somalia.
yeah,
There you go.
then we went to Pakistan. We didn't stay there. I have a lot of friends in Pakistan, but we didn't stay. We just fueled there to Varanasi, India. So some of these are more than 700, FYI. Then we went from Varanasi to Mumbai, Mumbai to Calcutta, Calcutta to Chiang Mai, Thailand, Chiang Mai down to Phuket, and the airport's name is escaping me. Then we went to Singapore for 2 days. Then we did Bali because we were surfing at a lot of these stops. So we did Bali. We surfed Bali, and then we went.
Wait, hold before you keep going because this is awesome. What have you got in the plane? What's in there?
Just
You got
just our
surfboards
kit.
and stuff?
No, we were renting surfboards all over
Okay.
these places.
Okay.
And we just had our
Just
kit.
change clothes.
Yeah, change of clothes. I had my technical stuff for this big of a trip for the airplane, charts and nav stuff.
And are you the mechanic?
No. I mean, I'll facilitate and assist, but I'm not the mechanic.
Okay.
We did have some things break, and we did assist the process with other mechanics. But
Okay. Okay,
yeah.
keep going. Sorry,
Yeah, no, that's all right.
How big is the plane? Yeah, one more question. How big? Because I'm used to just flying Super Cubs in Alaska, where you can't bring a handkerchief without pissing off the pilot.
Remind me. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to send you a DVD about Super Cubs in Alaska. If you still have something that'll play a DVD, it's pretty cool. We made this film, about a 50-minute film about bush flying. It was awesome.
Cool.
But yeah, so then we hung out in Bali. We surfed in Bali and all that in Indonesia. Had great food. And then we went from there into Australia, where, oh my goodness, I forgot about that. We landed up in Darwin, and we're going to go to like their version of a big state park. We were going to go to their version of a big state park in the north part of Australia. And they said, don't drive at night. I'm like, no problem. And we're driving down the highway in the middle of nowhere, and this poor little kangaroo, big kangaroo, actually jumps in front of us, takes out the whole car, totaled.
Yeah.
And
I've spent a lot of time in Australia.
Holy cow!
Yeah,
it was quite
gray.
That's an hour story at the minimum. But anyway, we walked out of there, hitchhiked, this and that. It was nuts. And then we got to the east coast of Australia, surfed there for a couple days. Then we went to a place I've never been to, which was really cool. It's called Lord Howe Island.
Yeah.
And I've never been there. And it's got this little runway. They only allow a few hundred people on the island at a time. When we landed there, we found this guide, and we wanted to go hike up this volcanic mountain, and because the surf was terrible just on that particular day. And he's like, oh, you can't do it. We're like, I'll just set the pace. And if we're not making pace, we'll just turn around. And we got up to the top of this thing where these birds, I think they migrate there periodically. I'd have to check one of my notebooks. I write everything down. So I have like 40 volumes of notebooks with all these little notes. But anyway, this bird, we're up at the top of this thing. We're just taking a break, chilling out. And there was just hundreds of them. And they would fly by and drop at your feet. I have no idea to this day why. I've asked, and I never got a straight answer, never really followed up further than that. But they just dropped to your feet, and they were all doing it, and it was just wacky. I mean, it was totally wacky. And so anyway, we left Lord Howe, went to New Zealand, did a bunch of stuff in New Zealand, and a lot of trekking. We surfed a little bit. It wasn't that good. Then we came back to Australia. We went out through PNG, Papua New Guinea. That was just a fuel stop. Then we got into the Philippines, and we went to this island called Segura, I believe it's pronounced. Wild, awesome, great stop. There's another place I've never been to, and it's on the east side of the Philippines. They had 3 different surf breaks. They had this boat break we went out on, a great pier break.
Is that Sargao?
Sargao.
Siar? Yeah,
Sargao.
Yeah, we had the boat. I haven't been there either. Our boat went there. I have this kite surfing expedition thing, but it went there. But I haven't been there either.
Oh, put that on your list. It was fantastic. It was one of my favorite stops, and it was just the people were great. It was some really nice surfing, which doesn't have to be a big wave. And we're old, so let's just ride nice, safe waves, not big killer waves, And So that was a blast. And he's like, Peter, can you extend? Because I'm always on a tight schedule. And I go, I'll figure out a way to extend. We'll stay here a couple more days. And so then coming into your answer to your question, we left there, Manila for a fuel stop, Taiwan. We surfed Taiwan. It was pretty good actually. And we hopped over to Okinawa, had some really good food, surfed Okinawa. Not bad. It wasn't just really up while we were there, just while it wasn't building. And then we went up to Sapporo, Japan. Great food again. And then out of Sapporo over Kamchatka into Petropavlovsk, Peter and Paul.
Whoa.
And we did a volcano hike. Oh, no. That was a different trip. Sorry. Anyway, Peter and Paul got a bite to eat and then into Anchorage and back to the U.S. So that's how you get across the Pacific in a small plane.
Up through the Aleutians.
Yeah. And,
fantastic.
Hop over and back to the U.S., which you always feel good coming back home.
How long was the trip in total?
7 weeks on that one.
Why were you on such a tight schedule? What's that all about? Why didn't you just take more time?
That's, I don't know. That's me living
Is that the owner?
No, me. It's always me on the schedule side.
Okay.
I always have a lot going on, I guess. The risk of sounding self-aggrandizing. I got always constraints, and this plane's waiting for me to get back and flight test. My editor's waiting for chapters from me, and my race plane needs work that I got to do or design. It's just I'm always on a very flexible as well. It has to be
as you can be, but it's hard. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Huh. And so you talk about what's the kind of main thing that pays the bills these days? Is that the company that handles the corporate jets?
Yeah, I pivoted from flight test, and the market just changed. It's just different structure nowadays for contract flight testing, and so it was a pretty natural pivot into the corporate flying because I've done test flying on corporate jets, and I really like corporate jets. It's a different adventure, and we started acquiring customers and turning it into a full-time business of managing private jets for people. Okay. And it's everything from staffing them, managing the maintenance, managing their trips, especially international trips, hangars, insurance, you name it, the whole thing. And that's PC Aviators. That is what pays my bills and allows me to write books and still race airplanes and all that silly stuff.
Scariest airplane or flight incident you've ever had, or you've probably had many. I don't know. You don't leave it to one if there's a bunch.
I mean, there's a bunch. I've had over 23 or 4 engine failures in aircraft. Most of them gone very well back to runways. I had a race jet that I had to put into the desert in 2016. And in fact, it's on YouTube. NBC was there filming. And that one was intense. I mean, again, when things are happening, I don't want to sound macho because there's no place for that. But I get very focused. I get very kind of quiet. I'm thinking very rapidly and, life preservation first, aircraft preservation next, and all that stuff because they don't always go hand in hand. And I had to put that plane in the desert and it's totaled, but I walked out of it. And I've had some really great mentors that I give a lot of credit to for being able to walk away from that, that crash.
Were you the only one on board?
Yeah. When we raced, there can't be anyone on board.
This was in a race.
Yeah. This was during a race, 2016. I was trying to retain my championship from 2015. And it's a very complicated series of events, but I had to leave the course because I had a loud bang in this jet. And I was climbing vertically. I pulled the power about halfway back because, until you know the problem, you don't want to go to idle and you don't want to leave your power full. So mid-range is a good thing to do. So I pulled the power to mid-range and I was zorching on up, going up to whatever altitude I could get and intercepting my best glide speed. And that plane's 160. And again, a lot happening at the same time. But I had the side canopy, which is still baffling to me, had a big hole in it and a crack propagated through it. And this is bullet resistant, I'll say plexiglass. It's not plexiglass, but really thick stuff. And it was on the side though. If I hit a bird, it would have been in the front, right? So I had the loud bang. realized I had this crack in the side canopy. So what? Plane flies just fine, except until I was on my way to get altitude. Altitude's life insurance, right? So I was getting altitude, and then my pitch controls were jammed in the trim, and I couldn't budge them. So I'm like, oh, if I don't have that working well, it's time to bail out of this airplane. If you can't control it, you got to get out. So I was headed northbound away from all the crowds and stuff. I got that freed up. I did a functional check, control sweep, and all that stuff. I was up there floating around doing 160 at this point, and the plane was now flying fine. And then I looked down and continuing to evaluate what happened. The chase plane never found me. It would have been helpful for him to tell me, hey, you're missing a part here. You got smoke there. He never found me. And, things happen. And so I set up to come back down and recover to runway 8. And I believe in treating emergencies as normal as you can, depending on the type of emergency. So I came in overhead. I hit high key and I started to turn. And when I hit low key is where I got to add power. And I went to add power and there was nothing. And I was looking at the gauges going, but the gauges look good. And they're like, yeah, well, dumbass, better accept what's in front of you because it may look good, but it's not good. And,
right.
If I made a turn to the runway at that point, no way I would have made it. And so I had to turn 90 degrees away from the runway because I wouldn't have made the 180. I was losing too much altitude and speed and all that stuff. So then I aimed north and I started. Now I got to shut down the plane mode and reduce fire risk, reduce flipping over risk, get ready to get out of this thing when I touch down. And so I was lined up for this road. And it was looking pretty good. It's dirt road, dirt like a Jeep path, but it was flat. And I made my last Mayday call. I shut all the electrics off, I shut the fuel off, and started unlatching things so I could get out as quick as I could. There's a secondary latch on the canopy and things like that. So as I'm getting down low, right in front of me, between myself, the aircraft, and the dirt road, was this 3-foot wide, roughly concrete pillar. And I guess it's about 2 feet wide, about 3 feet tall, right in the height of the sagebrush in the desert. And I was like, I think that's bad if you hit that. That's in the bad category.
Right.
So, yeah, so because I want to keep the plane level when I was contacting the ground, so I minimized flipping it over. And so I just ruddered off to the left, very little, popped the nose up, went into the desert on a 345 heading, touchdown, and then the entire Nevada desert went into my face. I swear, it was horrible. Because I have a mask on and I have my helmet and goggles and all that stuff, and I couldn't get over how much dust came into my face. It was terrible. But I think it was a big factor in because a lot of fuel, like you could see it in the video, there was a belly feeder tank, so that just ruptured immediately, and jet fuel spraying all over the place like a perfume bottle on steroids.
Jeez.
But I think that dust actually was suppressing any spark turning into a flame. I think it was a added value. And so I was just flying it instead of sliding on the belly because you don't want to put the gear down into a soft surface and sliding to. And it came. I plowed through. I literally made this really nice furrows plow line for about 1,200 feet. And then right at the end, it just made a gentle right turn. I popped the canopy off. I got out. Then there's rattlesnake marks and holes all over the ground. Like, you got to be kidding me. That's not cool. And then I just figured I'd walk over to that dirt road because at least I'm not in the desert proper. And it was like a scene in a movie. I had my helmet, my parachute, my gear. I'm just walking to this, and I was all by myself. There was no rescue folks for like 5 minutes. It took them a little longer to get out there, and yeah. And then I was like, "Hey, can I borrow your
out
phone?"
in Nevada, Stan. We did a big search and rescue for a very good friend who disappeared out there last year paragliding, and I know that dust you're talking about. It is unbelievable. It's 1.5 foot deep, and it's just, oh man, it gets everywhere. Wow, I'm glad that one ended up okay. Have you had any other? Have there been times you've been in an airplane when you've thought, "Yep, this is it, not going to get to the ground"?
I never. I don't allow that to enter my head. It's we had a really bad fire on this vintage airplane, really large vintage airplane a few years ago, and it was bad. The entire, and this is a big airplane, 90-foot wingspan. The entire cabin cockpit was full of smoke. And lucky in that plane, the side windows can open in the cockpit, and I had a couple guests on the plane, and I had them up breathing that fresh air because it was that bad, and the flame was coming out of this massive junction box, bigger than your home's circuit breaker box, and I was just, there's two pilot airplanes, so I got out of my seat, and he was doing a great job flying the plane. I'm like, go towards that water, because if this goes bad, we're going to go land in that water. If that flame doesn't reduce, it's just going to get worse. And then aluminum doesn't do well with flames, and then parts start to fail, and failing parts in altitude don't get along too well. So I was like, go towards that water, and if we have to, we'll ditch in the water near the shoreline and get out. And so I shut off all the electrical power, and I start pulling every single circuit breaker. There's about 110 circuit breakers in that plane, trying to find out what the electrical fire source was. And then I saw the flames were reducing, and then they stopped. And then we did a bunch of emergency stuff to get the gear down and pump down, and then we landed without our power on, and back at a runway, and it all went really well. One guy got smoke inhalation really bad, and so we had to take him in for oxygen. But other than that, the plane was back flying a few months later. But that one was pretty intense fire. It was bad.
What happened in Pakistan? You said you got a lot of friends in Pakistan, but you had some gunpoint stuff.
Well, I was just sharing this story. I forgot about this story, and it's a really good one because it deals with the empathy of humans, and finding where that Venn diagram overlaps with very different people and very different worlds. And it was 4 a.m, and I had a driver, and we're driving through Pakistan. We went through this one section that has roadblocks, and we knew that, and we get pulled. We stopped at the roadblock. The scene is just right out of Hollywood, right? Everybody's pointing guns at the car, and they're all acting angry. And I'm like, why are you so angry? I'll give you a chocolate bar, So they pulled the driver out, and they took him away. And I'm like, that's probably unfavorable, So I get out of the car. They're telling me to get back in the car, and they speak about 8 words of English, and my Urdu is about less than that. And so I'm trying to do hand gestures, and so I'm hanging out inside the back seat of the car, just chilling. And I don't know where I came up with this idea, and it subsequently I've used it ever since in several heightened experiences. I had one of these little Sony, cameras, the little ones. I pulled it out, and I was making the gesture, can I take a picture? And he's like looking at me like I'm nuts, He's like, why does this kook want to take a picture, And he's being all mean and angry, and I'm like, no, I want to get a picture with you. So, through sign language and everything else, I'm taking a selfie with him, the guy with the most stripes on his arm. And he's like, okay. And we take a picture. And then I asked him if I could hold his rifle while we take a picture. He's like, okay. So I'm holding his rifle. He's taking a picture of me while I hold the rifle. This very surreal moment, and he actually cracked a smile. And then he had one of his subordinates come over and take a picture of he and I together holding these rifles.
Fantastic.
And he was like, okay, you guys can leave. I'm like, oh, where's my driver? He'll be back. It's fine, And his English actually improved slightly as he de-escalated.
I learned that sailing around the world when we were places that were, potentially a pirate area, Malacca Straits kind of thing. I learned we always had cigarettes and a Polaroid. Yep. Those were the two things that,
Smart move.
Don't get the guns out, invite them on board, offer them some cigarettes, and start taking pictures. And a Polaroid was, now you could just do it digitally. But back then that was terrific because you could literally go think, and then they, show them. It just diffused everything.
I couldn't agree more. Coca-Cola goes a long way, and I don't even drink soda. The other one is newspapers. If you give them a current newspaper, they love it.
Totally. Magazines.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Magazines, yeah.
Sometimes magazines that have scantily clad women, some parts of the world tend to work
Sears
pretty
catalog.
well.
Yeah, Sears catalog will work for that.
Exactly. Right. Too much. Any other scary, when you think back, as a long career in the air, I don't know why I'm centering on scary. It just seems like, with all the racing and all the test flying, there must have been some moments.
Well, I mean, like 2011, I lost my engine, racing, but that was easy. I knew the engine failed. I came off the track, got some altitude. I recovered to runway 14. It's I don't know. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm being macho, but it wasn't scary. I just had a job to do. I had gates I had to pass so that the job came out successfully. And I had to
Hmm.
pass those gates. I needed this much altitude to make runway 14. Don't turn this way, turn that way. You just, training and rehearsal and stuff. It has an intensity to it. And I'm always more concerned about my team. My team's awesome. You know, People very close to me and all volunteers. It's already too expensive to race, and I know they're nervous when they see and hear a mayday called because they have radios for lots of reasons. But great outcome, and other times like that. I think weather can be one of those moments that really get the hair in the back of your neck going because
Hmm.
I had one that was pretty intense. I was taking one of those small jets, the Eclipse. I was delivering it in England. I never cut fuel type, never. That's just a fool's errand. And I left Reykjavik on this leg going to Wick, Scotland, really up north. And I went missed approach because the weather was bad. And I start climbing out, and I said my alternate was Aberdeen. They have an ILS there, which gets you down to really low weather conditions. And I said I'll go to Aberdeen. So I turned south to go to Aberdeen, and plenty of fuel for that, no problem. And I don't know, it seemed like hours, but it was probably 12 minutes going towards Aberdeen south. And he said, Aberdeen just shut down. I was like, well, that's unfortunate. And I was like, so what's my closest ILS that is still open weather-wise? And they had me go to the Orkney Islands. I'm like, oh boy,
Hmm.
islands and weather, not good. Now I'm
Hmm.
getting tight on fuel, and the Orkneys are north, and I was
Sure.
going south. And I'm like, this is bad. But this is why you have reserve fuel. I mean, it's there to use if you have to. And so I was I was coming into the Orkneys, and it was blowing like 35 knots and rain and all that nasty stuff. And they're like, hey, you're gonna be number two. There's this life flight, someone with a medical thing. Inbound, I go, hey, that's great. I promise I won't get in the way. You could turn me early onto that ILS, but I'm landing like right now. I'm critical fuel. And like, okay, can you keep your speed up? Like, whatever you need, but I'm landing right now, and I will not get in the way of the life flight. And so they did. It turned me early, and the wind was so much that the plane was offset about 30 degrees to the right. So you're looking at the quarter view window, and rolled out, uneventful. But the weather, I think, is intense, and I
Hmm.
was really tight on fuel. I was landing there no matter what. Let's put it that way,
Right.
and it worked out
Is
fine.
is that was part of the world tour that you took us through earlier? Is the flying part of something like, you're in a jet and you're not flying in Alaska right on the deck, looking at the
Sure.
moose, up tall. Is that still exciting for you? I wouldn't imagine it matches the racing and stuff, or is the beauty of that kind of a trip really all the places you get to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because absolutely, racing is one type of flying. It's really intense. You have 8 planes with you, feet apart. Bad things can happen. You're asking the most out of an airplane. It's super in intensity. You get out of the plane after racing. You gotta slow down back to what the world is moving at, right? And I know you get that. And if I take a beautiful Falcon over to Oman, which I just did. I just got back from there a few weeks ago. It's different challenges. The flying, it's a ton of straight level flying. I personally enjoy it. It's very opposite, to use the racing example. But I
Hmm.
know I'm going to get to another adventure. In this case, I played golf, which I'm very bad at, but I like it, on this golf course where you could not putt on the greens. It was impossible. There was no putting greens, but there was a hole there. It was hilarious. But it's another tiny little paragraph of
Right.
an adventure, right?
Sure.
There's not a golf course that bad here in the U.S. Period. And it was hilarious, and we laughed about it. My dutiful pilot that went with me, but so yeah, it's absolutely different. It's not your hair on fire, but it's very enjoyable to me. And those trips, the international trips in a large corporate plane, they're full of challenges, but they're different challenges. There's permits, there's landing rights, there's all kinds of stuff. And now throw in COVID, which is a whole nother layer of enjoyment, and that makes it
Hmm.
even more more difficult and different,
We didn't get to hear what country haven't you been to? There's one.
Oh yeah, Madagascar.
Oh, you got to go there.
I know.
That's a place I've spent a lot of time, and Madagascar is pretty amazing. We've been watching all the cartoon films with my 4-year-old the last few nights too. Yeah, gotta love King Julian. Yeah, that's a crazy place. You'd
Yeah, I
love it.
absolutely want to. No
It's just
reason.
built for
It just
adventure.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly. I've
happen.
heard great things about it. Like you're another person telling me, with a great
It's
background that
wild. You're
I would.
really going. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very, very, very poor. I think it's fourth poorest in the world or something. But it's,
Wow.
the flora and fauna there are mind-boggling. It's good.
Wow.
It's very
Sounds
unique.
awesome. Yeah.
What happened in Guatemala?
Well, I got involved with a group that is informal, and it's not some large organization. It was just, hey, let's go help some people that need help. And there there are 3 orphanages down there that we decided to make better for them. And the one orphanage was their kids get stolen. It's horrible.
Mhm.
And so we got some friends to help with that whole security thing that are very well experienced in that and well trained in that. And then the big thing was to put in a cement floor. So we did that because that stopped a pathway for the snatching to occur. And
Good
then,
God, they dig? They come up through the
yeah,
floors?
they come up
Jeez.
underneath the wall through the dirt, and if the windows are protected, and we did that.
Holy
And
cow.
so we just helped these orphans, and it's been really successful. We helped them with school supplies and other technology. Obviously, the security was first and foremost. We did several trips down there, and then COVID happened, so a lot of the doctors and others weren't comfortable going there during COVID. I was like, well, give me a plane to take. I'll head down and we'll see what's up. But we've had favorable correspondence with them even during COVID that all of the measures we applied have been working now for several years. And it's kind of like the teach a kid to fish story. They get to eat for life, right? And it's kind of that approach. We don't want to just show up and
Mm,
give them things. We want to make them better contributors to the community, and
right.
it's been really rewarding. And
Has most of your philanthropic work been oriented around kids?
a little bit, I have this phrase I've used for years: kids don't have a choice. All of us adults have a choice, right? We can
Mm,
do good, do bad, whatever. And kids are just born and they don't have a choice. They're just there. And so, yeah, plus, raised by a single mom, that whole type of outlook definitely has some influence on me. So, a fair amount with that, a fair amount with our veterans. And then again, people that don't have the choice, people that were born with a genetic issue, we help with an organization here in Park City called National Ability Center, and we donate it. We call it Fighter Pilot for a Day. We take them up in a military fighter. It's just an auction item that raises a ton of money for their group, and it's really terrific to see how well organized that NAC is, and helping these people are, again, they don't have a choice, right?
mm,
They're just born, and we have choices. You and I have choices. The kids don't. So
yeah. Good
I
for
like
you,
that.
man. That's awesome. I was kind of caught off guard there when you said Madagascar, and I just kind of ate that. But that means you've been to places, North Korea,
Yeah, yeah,
Syria.
yeah.
Have you been into a lot? Have you a lot of the countries you've been in? Have they been in active conflict times or?
Yeah, all kinds of reasons. Yeah, North Korea was a diplomatic deal that
Mm,
I was pilot for, and a couple different times. It's funny you keyed in on that because when people hear that little factoid, they ask like, "Well, what about Ukraine?" I'm like, "Well, that's easy. I mean, you know."
right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Cuba, North Korea. Well, Cuba now is semi-open, but yeah, just doing different tasks and jobs, and lived in Turkey for a while, lived in South America for a while, and so yeah.
What's the favorite place you've lived or been?
Um, if I did it by kind of like topic or region, uh, huge Italy proponent. Love Italy. Love the
You
people. Love
love
the
food.
food. Yeah,
Mm,
I'm a foodie,
yeah.
and I love the history there. but the people are awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I think when there's awesome people in a location, there's usually awesome food. Iceland's another one. That's another one. I'm never tired of going
Mm,
to Iceland. Great food, whole different scene, really nice people, welcoming. Thailand, and the same thing, Yeah, hiking in Thailand's awesome, and doing a jungle tour on my friend's elephant is awesome. But the food and the people, right? And
mm.
it's different. The one common thing among food is everyone has their version of a burrito, some rolled up flour thing with food stuffed in it. Every single place has
Sure.
some form of a flour rolled up thing with food in it, right? And
Yeah.
but yeah, I really, really like Thailand a lot. I've had a lot of great trips there. Yeah,
Is there a place you've been that if you had to go back, you'd go, not that excited about it?
yeah. Oh yeah, DRC.
Oh, yep. Okay.
That wasn't fun. I was in Somalia. I had a few different times. Young boys in horrible situations pointing an AK-47 at me. Not
Yeah.
cool, because they don't
Yeah.
have a value,
Sure.
and they're in a horrible deal.
Life
But
means nothing.
life
Yeah.
means nothing, and if they make it to 18, they're like, "Wow, I'm old," and that's
Yeah,
horrible.
Liberia was like
Oh
that.
god, yeah,
I
yeah,
went into
same thing.
port there to get fuel in Liberia, and it was, there are a lot of countries. Madagascar is a perfect example of this. That are really poor,
Yeah,
and you just the people, the community, the friendliness, it just blows your mind. And there are other places that are really poor that are just scary, in my
right,
experience, just
right.
terrifying, and Liberia
Yeah,
was one of them.
yeah, and there's several African countries that are really tough. Yeah, West Africa's full of some sketch.
Yeah, it's a
You
tough
know,
place.
I was in this Ebola village for this experience, and I didn't go there intentionally, but we're trying to help out a little bit. And, oh, it was horrible. And then there's bad guys there on top of it. So you got this horrible
Yeah,
disease infested area, and then there's bad guys. It's like,
a lot of corruption.
it's sad.
I wanted to ask you about this Discovery Channel, the productions you've been doing there, the Dangerous Flight series. I don't know this one. What's this about?
Well, thanks for asking, because that was super fun. I almost didn't do it. But the whole premise is a broker sells an airplane to somebody in, say, the Philippines, and the plane's in Florida. And then Discovery Channel followed us around and did interviews with us and the goings on and the happenings and the risks. And the planes were, smaller. They weren't tiny, but they also weren't a corporate jet. So we had to stop a fair amount and um, have the adventure on the ground too, so to speak. And so each episode was following two different trips, and it
Huh.
was great. It was really good. It was doing well, and then we had a tragedy, and that's why it got canceled. We had a
What
director
happened?
die, and he
In a plane?
crashed. Yeah, he crashed in Kenya after I completed a 4-week trip with them, and I left, and he wanted to fly around Mount Kenya, around this spot called Dead Man's Curve, and I told him, "Do not go there," and I said, "I won't go there, and I'm not taking you there." And I was, it's about a 24-hour trip home. So I went down to Nairobi, flew to, I think, Amsterdam, and then Amsterdam to Salt Lake, and finally get home. I was literally driving up the mountain, going home. Phone rang with his foreign number, and I knew what happened. I knew before I picked up the phone, and sure enough, John died. And he's a great guy, great shooter, film shooter, and
Why
just
was
that's
this spot the dangerous whatever? What was
well,
it called?
it's called Dead Man's Curve, but it's on the
Okay.
east side, and there's a big draw in there. Like, this is a big deal for paragliding, because if there's a big cold air draw, it's always there. It's almost always there. And that down current can get up to 60 miles an hour easily. And in some cases more, depending on where in the world you are. And this one has a really bad current that draws you down because of that cold sinking air that goes
Hmm.
deep into this, volcano that goes up to 18,000 feet. And sure enough, they crashed within feet of where I said don't go, because he wanted the shot.
Wow.
he was a consummate, cinematographer, and he was great at his craft. And found this local guy that took him up in a small plane, and both of them were killed instantly. It was a real shame, and that's why
Wow.
we didn't continue with the next season. And but it was a great little run, though, I can tell you that. And the people love it. They still air it. They still play it around the world. And we get questioned, are they going to do it again? And I think Discovery Channel got a little, gun shy.
Right. Has there been a lot of tragedy in your career, given what you do? You lost a lot of friends along the way?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've lost a lot of friends. Test flying has some hazards in it. Racing does, and then some of the international trips, just people, bad turn of events, bad luck, and they don't go home. Yeah,
Huh.
it's unfortunate.
Do you chalk up your own survival to any kind of a approach more than luck? I mean, there's the obvious stuff, but I'm looking for something more, you know, I don't know. You have a playbook.
Yeah,
Listen to your inner self. Anything that just
I do. I never allow outside or external pressures to affect my decisions, and I think a lot of people have had bad outcomes. They didn't realize they were pressuring themselves from the external
Mhm.
forces. And, we call it get homeitis. That's a classic. Weather, oh, they'll be fine. I've done this before. Um, and then some of it is just not enough planning or training in a certain area. And, treat it as carefully as they should in cases. And then, of course, bad luck. So I definitely plan. I've taken some single engine planes across the Atlantic, hopping across the different islands and everything, and I get done with them like, God, that was a bad idea. Why did I do that? Going across the Atlantic at 5,000 feet, um, and but I'm very conservative about the weather. I mean, I was a professor of meteorology, and I still don't think I know enough about weather, and I'm just very conservative in lesser capable planes in certain environments. If the
Mm,
satellite picture is not good, I'm not going. See ya. And
mm,
that's when the schedule does not bother me at all. Because I
mm.
promise I don't want to hang out in Kuujjuaq, Canada, eating the same food every single day, which I've done.
Right.
But
But that is what gets the bush pilots in Alaska. It's usually when they're flying for the lodges or the fishermen or something, and there's pressure.
there's
There's pressure
absolutely
to fly in the weather and
they got the bad weather scenario. They got the pressure. They got planes that are they're not super well equipped. I've flown a bunch up there, and
mm.
they can only do certain things. Bottom line.
How do you think about 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? Are you a real goal oriented guy?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay. Do
Yeah.
you how do you you've had all this adventure? Where do you go from here?
The next immediate goals are definitely part of it's the books. I'm going to interrupt the series with a book about my flying stuff and things related to the flying stories, like some of them we're talking about. It's mostly done, but I've had to transcribe my notebooks, and that is a daunting task. I now have a solution for that. So maybe by January I'll be able to release that third book, but it's not a part of the series. It's just the flying adventures of my first 30 years of flying. So those are some immediate goals. I really want to see the relevant series, at least relevant the book, turned into a movie.
Mm.
I don't know anything about it. I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to find the people to get some mentoring from. It's been hard. We wrote the screenplay, and I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome. I'm like, doesn't anybody want this?
That's tricky. It's all who
And
you know.
yeah,
The can I just ask a way too direct question? Has it been
yeah,
quite a successful book, Relentless?
yeah,
And is the new Cold War, which was just released, is that part of that series? Is that the second one?
yeah. So the series is the title of the first book, and that's relevant. And relevant is a term I think that's relevant
Mm.
to a lot of people and professions. But anyway, so relevant is the series, and the second book in the series is called The New Cold War. But it is a standalone story. It'll make references to the first book, but you can pick it up and just read the second book, and
Okay.
it will be a story in and of itself.
And that's also military fiction?
Yeah, it's a spy thriller. It's a CIA asset dealing. So a lot of my book is about the metaphysical side of the world. If I can get people to think a little differently, maybe, or just challenge things, and I don't mean challenge like like maybe your daughter at 4 years old does. Like, why do you want me to do that, Dad? I don't
Right.
mean that way, but I mean like genuine asking questions why instead of just googling stuff and listening to the media. Maybe find someone that actually lived there with success and experience and learn from them about a certain region, Somalia, right? Or something
Hmm.
like that. And so in the narrative in both of these books, I really pose a lot of philosophical questions, a lot of why questions, historical references. So, you know, everyone right now wants to rewrite history. And I get it. That's all cool. But however, there are things that happen in this world and you can't look at it from our perspective in 2021.
No,
And so to gain
absolutely.
the right perspective and or the time perspective is super hard. It's extremely hard. And to
Hmm.
really understand the perspective that was going on in 1855 in 1772, blah blah blah, and really understand why did someone rally people around a city in the Middle East, and is it good? Is it bad? Is it different? And is it good and bad from 2021 perspective, or was it good and bad in 700 AD, or whatever the case may be? Just using one example, but really have that understanding. I mean, you don't have to become this scholar in history, but maybe just a little bit more common ground among different cultures and people,
Hmm.
and not just the people live at the end of the runway. They hate airplanes no matter what. Well, why are you at the end of the runway, folks? you know, I mean, there's a reason your house was 20% undervalued compared to the rest of the county, because it was at
Right.
the end of the runway. And now you
Yeah.
hate airplanes. Well, maybe go meet a pilot and really talk about what's going on there. And,
Right.
you know, uh, so throughout those two books, even though it's a story about a CIA asset and what he does, for example, in the new Cold War, we're really, I'm challenging the whole quantum computing that's emerging because we've had times in my opinion, the last big topic we had to deal with was when the world started getting nuclear weapons, and we had to deal with it philosophically because a weapon could take out an entire country in some cases. And I'm not here to get on a platform about good, bad, or indifferent, but the world had to tackle that philosophically, and they did. And of course, people made mistakes. It's just we're humans, and the idea is that the mistakes can't be catastrophic. Make some mistakes, learn from it, own it. I know not everybody owns them, but
Hmm.
when quantum computers, if we had a proper quantum computer, I mean, full up, running with the proper bridging to allow humans to interface with it, it may, it could, it is possible that it would be able to make a cure for cancer in seconds or hours. And we don't know. I mean, we don't know what we don't know, but what they can do is unbelievable. The potential for what they can do is unbelievable. However, there's the downside. And everything we use, our phones, our computers, our banking, our credit cards, is all based on integer security measures. A quantum computer will hack that in a second, and the
Hmm.
entire world's security will be gone, absolutely gone. And as a world, because we're citizens of the world. We're not citizens of the US. We live in the US, but we're citizens of the world. And we're not philosophically ready to answer that question or that complete change in our civilization where nothing is secure. Because there's a lot of
Hmm.
bad guys out there. There are a
Sure.
lot of bad guys out there. People are like, oh, people want to do the right thing. I'll take you on a few trips and we'll go meet the people that are the bad guys because they
Hmm.
exist. They just
Hmm.
do. And it's human nature to try and get things easier for some people. It's human nature to progress towards a bit of a chaos. Entropy is a reason in science. There's a reason we have entropy existing, the term entropy. And so anyway, a long story, a little bit on my soapbox, but we broached the topic of quantum physics and quantum computers in the second book. It's part of the plot.
Hmm.
And I had some, I say we because I had some really good advisors on quantum physics and quantum development, and other good advisors too. But
It sounds very Bond tenant. It sounds, yeah, fantastic. I
yeah,
can't wait to catch up on them. Was there a need in you to write a book? Was this something that was just brewing all along, or because writing books is hard?
it's really hard, as you know. It was harder than I thought. I enjoy the creative process, doing the filming for TV. I made a documentary and it was terrible. It was absolutely horrible. But I learned a ton from it. And then I made some good documentaries. The bush flying I referenced in Alaska kind of made it for fun, but it was very professionally done, good cinematography, good production value. It was great. And I really enjoyed that. So the books were just another creative extension. I wanted to use the right half of my brain a little bit more. Getting a book done in 12 months was hard for me, and I got it done. It's not perfect, but I really like it. And they're doing well, to answer your aforementioned
Yeah,
question.
right. So,
They're doing well, and I hope they continue to do well, because you don't make any money from it. I just want to go and talk to authors that are doing this for a living. I'm like, holy cow. You
yeah.
just don't make any money, but the sales are important because it creates the momentum for other things to happen. And so the
Mm.
numbers are important. Like my brother, I just shame him into it. I'm like, John, go buy the book. And my spouse and my friends, I'm like, you guys have to buy the book. I'll give you the money for it, but it's the number game, right? It's not
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
the earnings,
It's a trip. It's a weird world too. And my book is not something that you would even put on Amazon. Because it's a very niche thing. If you're a
right.
paraglider in the world, you know about the book, and that's what's terrific about it. It was like our kite surfing business. If you were a kite surfer, you knew about the business because it's pretty easy to reach all those people.
Yeah.
But when you're writing a spy thriller, you want to sell it to the masses. It's a trip because it is a numbers game, like you said, and a New York Times bestseller is 10,000 books. It's not that many copies. And so
No.
I'm with you. How do these people, it's a tough game to make a lot of money, to make money in, period.
Yeah,
make,
it's
let
really
alone
hard.
a lot of money.
And I've been stumbling, and I've been getting help to get the message out there and sell the book, and I'm really happy with it, with the amount of people supporting it. I'm super happy and thankful, and hopefully that plays into the third book, and getting that, continuing the momentum.
Peter, good for you. Well, what a joy it is to hear about a fraction, a tiny, tiny snippet of your history and your adventuring and your love of scotch, which we'll have to take up at some point. And congratulations on writing Relentless and the New Cold War. And those of you listening, go out and grab it. And I'll have all the links up in the show notes for the books and your videos. I'll put on that. I think I've seen the bush plane documentary you're talking about, but we'll have to put up some links to that as well. I've seen all those up in Alaska. I'm an Alaska freak. And, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time and sharing some of these stories. We'll have to do a part 2 here at some point.
Well, Gavin, thanks for the time. I super appreciate it, and eager to do part 2.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription. And it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.